Right, hi. I'm not sure what I'm going to see here. I can still see everybody else, so I guess that's right, is it, Deborah?
Yes, I'm not sure what's happened. For some reason, I've got everybody else, but I'm still on a little screen at the bottom. So there's always something going wrong.
I can see you, Phil. I don't know about anyone else. But...
Shall I just carry on and then?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I find it quite daunting to follow on from Charles, really, because it just makes me realise what a comfortable life I have, and the sort of living in well, when I first came to live down here, the company I came to work for, they advertised as come and work where other people have their holidays, and that was on the basis that it was the West Country. So living somewhere relatively comfortable, you couldn't think of anything more different from Nigeria. But anyway, I will try and follow Charles to the best that I can, but I'm a bit daunted by it, and it's just marvellous to hear from him and know that the little things that we do end up perhaps making a difference in Nigeria. So there were 10,000 church reps, and so there are 9,999 others, because I'm one of them. Been doing that since, well, for 11 years, and was before that. Now, what I was going to concentrate on in this little talk was, first of all, saying what was different this year about my volunteering, but also trying to explain a bit what my other role is, which is, I think, almost unique in Christian Aid. I think there's someone else somewhere who does something a little bit similar. But church rep, the difference this year, I mean, my role, apart from some of the community partnership collections that we've done, has been dominated in our church by the door-to-door. So it's leading a team of about 10 door-to-door collectors and collecting about £1,000 a year, basically, which has been going down slightly in recent years, but still holding up quite well. As well as that, there's an active Christian Aid group in the Yeovil area, which runs, and we're part of it as a church, runs Christian Aid lunches all through the year and raises another 3,000 or more from those lunches. So door-to-door collection, Christian Aid lunches, stopped, impossible this year after March. And so that's made it difficult. And I haven't been very imaginative. I'm very aware of other people being imaginative, and I'll mention that in a minute. But so we had an appeal for donations in Christian Aid Week. Interesting thing about that is if you have a Just Giving page, and this is good that this is what people are increasingly doing when they raise money for Christian Aid locally, then you can see how much you raise. Back in Christian Aid Week, we didn't do that in our church. So there's a mixture of money coming into the local treasurer or going straight to the appeal. So we don't know how much we raised. And so in faith, we raised a reasonable amount, but it's not quite the same, is it? Other things, we tried to do an appeal at Harvest, but the church was actually concentrating on the local food bank. And now a Southwest Christian Aid Facebook Christmas Tree Festival. And so I've passed all the details of that to our Facebook person at church. So little bits and pieces nibbling around the edges as a church rep this year is all I can say, really. And I'm just glad that other people have been more imaginative around the country, which I know because of my other role, which I'll now mention. I was recruited in 2017 from a job spec that I saw online, and then a conversation I had with the Somerset regional coordinator at the time, Fiona Dayborn, as a media volunteer. Now that, as an engineer in helicopter design, some of the skills don't really transfer very well into Christian Aid, but this did transfer IT skills and basically report writing. But there's quite a difference between writing a press release and writing a technical report. I think you'd find that our newspapers were pretty boring if they're all written in the style of a technical report. But I do write press releases. That's what I do. And I issue them to local news outlets. We go to the local papers, to local radio, which is actually very responsive to our press releases, BBC Local Radio, to diocese comms and equivalents across other denominations. I'm also responsible for running logs of local coverage. There's a tool which tells us every day how much Christian aid is mentioned in the press. And I extract that information and put it into a log, or the local, regional, rather than national news mentions. A little bit more on that in a minute. And I also keep a log of press contacts, and you'll be amazed at all the ins and outs of that around the country. I don't get involved in social media. I've dabbled in it for Christian Aid, but not very much. So we're back in with the radio and the papers in what I do. Thankfully, I don't work on my own. I work with Emma, who's a regional media coordinator, or I've seen her called a regional media officer as well. And she's a trained journalist, and she puts vibrant life into my report style writing. So she wakes people up with her style, and I sort of beaver away and adapt all the templates, if you like, for different campaigns and things we do to the individual things we're reporting locally. In that, I had liaised with the regional coordinators, now the CFOs, church engagement and fundraising officers, and originally it was in the southwest region. So what's changed this year? Some things haven't, in that I work from home and it's online, and I use Microsoft Teams to meet with people. Used to do that anyway. I normally used to meet my line manager, my Christian Aid line manager, about every 3 months, and typically we'd meet in a cafe in Street in Somerset, which is partway between Bristol and Yeovil. Well, that hasn't happened. It's it's been Teams. But the busiest times are normally Christian Aid Week by far, then Christmas, then Harvest. Same pattern this year, but things have changed. My role's changed with the reorganisation from Southwest region to the whole of England, which is quite interesting. There's less going on this year, but it's a wider area. But overall, it's been not so different, if anything, a little bit down, even though in volume of stuff to report on. The liaison with the CFOs, there's a gang of those. It's a small. There are less CFOs, obviously, in England than there were regional coordinators, but there was a small group of Southwest regional coordinators that I've been getting to know pretty well over the last 3 years, and so that's a bit different. And relationships matter, and that's why a week or so back I was busy with Cornwall, because I know Katrina, and she got to the front of the queue because she knew who to talk to get her press releases done. So that's an interesting, just an aside really, that in changes in organisation and the way that we have to communicate online like we do, relationships matter. And so, it's good to spend time keeping up to date with Emma online. And it was good in the past to meet in the flesh every now and then with people. So what am I reporting on? What's actually going on? No door-to-doors, carol singing this time of year. Is that happening? Well, there have been brilliant, and I've written it down here, brilliant, imaginative, innovative supporters. And I've been humbled by them really to see what they've been up to. Give you some examples from the press releases that we've produced this year. There was a Bournemouth priest and his 2 sons who did a non-stop 12-hour cycling relay without leaving home. Now, normally what they do is they cycle to Winchester Cathedral, and that's the thing that happens every year, and people go from all different directions for Christian Aid and raise a lot of money. But what they did was they stuck the bike up on blocks or whatever they did, and they sat and pedalled away for 12 hours at home as a relay, a father and a couple of sons. Up in Cumbria, there was a youth theatre that normally gets together and does a production for Christian Aid Week. And they, like a lot of things this year, they each contributed their little bit, and they stitched it all online on Facebook, and they raised money that way. In some villages in Hertfordshire, there were some people who were doing all sorts of little craft things, making things, and they called it a time and talents group. And they produced craft items in lockdown in their own homes, in faith that one day they'd be able to sell them in a sale for Christian Aid. Now, I know the first half of that story, but I must say I haven't caught up with the second half yet. I know they were making the stuff, but I don't know whether they've sold it yet. There was a retired nurse in Newport Pagnell who walked 100 kilometres locally around Newport Pagnell to recreate part of the Camino pilgrimage, which is, for people who know, it's in southern France, North Spain, Santiago, the Pyrenees sort of area. And she'd done the pilgrimage before in reality, and she was adding to it this 100 kilometres. I think it was the bit she'd missed actually before, and she was finishing it off, but walking around the streets of Newport Pagnell, raising money for Christian Aid as a pilgrimage. And that Camino pilgrimage is also featured in what other people have been doing as well. Back in Cornwall, there was a head teacher who dressed as Superman, an archdeacon, and some others who flew across Adrenaline Quarry on a zip wire for Christian Aid and raised money that way. Also, right across various places in the country, people picked up the 300,000 steps challenge in May to do 300,000 steps, which is an average 10,000 steps a day through the month of May. And that included a group of 5 ministers from Kingston in London who sort of ganged together so that they could say they'd done 1.5 million steps for Christian Aid, and they raised money that way. And more. I mean, I could go on. I mean, the latest things I was doing, Truro Cathedral, there's normally something called a big sing where they get 1,000 people in the cathedral for Christmas carols and raise money. And that this Friday evening will be going out on YouTube online with all the choir items and the readings all stitched together online. That's been going for 12 years. In Newquay, for 28 years, 7 local schools have been getting together for a Christmas concert, again for Christian Aid. And that, again this coming Friday evening, is going out online with all the children having recorded their items beforehand. So things have been happening. So that's what I do, and it's lovely to see what's going on. I would say that in writing press releases, they don't all give it, and you have to be ready to accept the fact that maybe half of what you do never sees the light of day. So that requires a certain amount of discipline and patience. But from my media log that I'm privileged to keep, I know that across England, there were at least 94 items of local news coverage for Christian Aid Week. That's in local papers and local radio, individual items, which may have been repeated, but the same item. So 94 items, of which 54 were generated by Christian Aid staff, which in this respect, I count myself one of, which also means that there were 40 that were generated by local groups, which is really good. Local groups just putting stuff in their local press, really important. But it's just nice to be part of that, going out and spreading the message of what's going on. Privileged to do it, really. I think of myself as a cog in a bigger wheel that brings God's love and justice to the poor. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Phil. That's really given us a fantastic insight into what you do, but also I think it's yeah, it's certainly inspirational to hear what all the other groups have been doing as well.